Marcus almost broke up with her over a spreadsheet. Not a fight, not a betrayal, a spreadsheet. She had laid out every dollar she spent in the last 6 months, color-coded by category, and slid her laptop across the kitchen table like she was handing him a contract. And Marcus, who had never once tracked his own spending, sat there looking at this woman thinking, I am either completely out of my league, or I just found my greatest competitive advantage. He chose the second option, and 3 years later, they hit a combined net worth of $400,000 before either of them turned 32. Here is what nobody tells you. The personal finance world is obsessed with the single life. Live alone. Keep your money. Do not let love derail your wealth journey. Half the finance influencers out there will tell you that romance is a liability, that emotional decisions are the enemy of rational investing, and that the fastest path to financial freedom is a solo sprint with no distractions. And there is a surface-level logic to that argument that sounds reasonable right up until you actually run the numbers. Because when you run the numbers, the real numbers, not the Reddit hot takes, the math tells a completely different story, and that story is the reason we are here today. Before we get into the mechanism, I need to make one thing clear. This is not a video about finding a rich partner. This is not about marrying money or outsourcing your financial problems to someone else. This is about understanding what economists call household economics and what it actually does to the trajectory of your wealth when two financially aligned people decide to build together. Stay with me because the numbers coming in about 3 minutes are going to reframe everything you think you know about love and money. Let us start with what most people get wrong. The standard personal finance argument against relationships goes something like this. Relationships cost money, dates cost money, weddings cost money, divorce costs even more, and emotionally, love makes you irrational, and irrationality is the enemy of compounding. That argument sounds logical. It is also catastrophically incomplete. Here is what it ignores. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, one of the most comprehensive studies of household wealth in America, consistently shows that married or partnered households accumulate significantly more wealth than single households at every income level. Not a little more, significantly more, and the gap widens as you move up the income ladder. Two people earning $70,000 a year and sharing one household do not have the financial power of one person earning $140,000. They have the financial power of someone earning $140,000 with a 30 to 40% expense reduction applied. That is a different number entirely. Think about it this way. Marcus earns $65,000 a year. His girlfriend Priya earns $62,000. Together they bring in $127,000. Now here is where it gets interesting. A one-bedroom apartment in their city costs $1,800 a month. Two separate apartments would cost them $3,600 a month combined. By sharing one home, they save $1,800 every single month. That is $21,600 a year in pure cost elimination, not income, cost elimination, which in investment terms is even better than income because it is post-tax. Now take that $21,600 and put it into a low-cost index fund, returning the historical S&P 500 average of roughly 10% annually. After 10 years, that single decision, sharing one address, produces approximately $344,000. After 20 years, it produces nearly $1.4 million from rent savings alone, from one decision that had nothing to do with picking the right stock or timing the market. This is what economists call the dish advantage, double income, single household, and it is one of the most quietly powerful wealth-building mechanisms in personal finance, and almost nobody talks about it in these terms. But the housing math is just the beginning. Let us talk about what happens to risk tolerance when two people are building together, and this is the part that changed everything for Marcus. When Marcus was single, he kept 90% of his portfolio in cash and money market accounts, not because he did not understand investing, he understood it fine, but because the psychological weight of a potential loss landed entirely on him. If his portfolio dropped 30%, that was 30% of his entire safety net. That anxiety, that single point of failure feeling, kept him paralyzed. He was playing not to lose instead of playing to win. The moment he and Priya started building a joint financial plan, something shifted. When two incomes are covering the baseline expenses, a market correction stops being an existential threat and starts being a buying opportunity. His risk tolerance went from 30% equities to 70% equities almost overnight, not because he became reckless, because the floor underneath him got higher. And research from the University of Michigan confirms this pattern. Coupled households, particularly those with shared financial goals, consistently take on more productive financial risk than single-income households, and over a 30-year horizon, that difference in asset allocation produces dramatically different outcomes. Marcus moved money into growth-focused index funds, a small allocation into REITs, and started maxing out both of their Roth IRAs. 2 Roth IRA contributions at the 2024 limit comes out to $14,000 a year going into tax-free growth accounts. That alone, compounded at 10% over 30 years, produces approximately $2.5 million, tax-free. From one benefit that only becomes accessible at full power in a dual-income household. And here is the thing about that number. That is not a fantasy. That is arithmetic. $14,000 a year, 10% average return, 30 years. You can verify it with any compound interest calculator in 30 seconds. The math does not care how you feel about it. Now we need to talk about the part people skip, the conversation that determines whether all of this works or completely falls apart. Priya called it the financial transparency talk. Marcus called it the most uncomfortable dinner of his life. They sat down about 4 months into dating before anything was serious enough to feel high stakes, and they laid it all out. Credit scores, debt balances, monthly cash flows, financial goals. The conversation lasted 3 hours, and it was the single most important 3 hours of their entire financial journey together. Here is why that timing matters. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that financial incompatibility is one of the top 3 predictors of relationship dissolution, ranking alongside communication and trust. And the tragedy is that most couples never have an explicit conversation about money until they are already financially entangled, at which point discovering incompatibility is not just emotionally painful, it is financially expensive. Disentangling shared finances after the fact costs time, legal fees, credit damage, and in many cases, years of compounding lost. Marcus had $12,000 in credit card debt at a 22% APR. Priya knew on date 4. Not because he volunteered it, she asked directly, because she had watched her parents destroy their marriage over hidden financial stress. That $12,000 became a shared problem they paid off together in 11 months, freeing up cash flow that went straight into their joint investment account. The transparency did not kill the romance. It accelerated the wealth building. And this is what nobody in the personal finance space talks about clearly enough. The financial conversation is the investment. It is due diligence on your most important long-term financial partner. Now let us talk about something more psychological, because the mechanics of DISH and dual Roth IRAs and shared expense elimination are powerful, but they are not the deepest reason aligned couples outperform solo wealth builders. The deepest reason is what behavioral economists call goal clarity under social accountability. Here is what that means in plain English. When Marcus was investing alone, his why was vague: retire someday, be comfortable, not stress about money. Those are not goals, those are feelings. Feelings do not survive the first bad quarter in the market. When the S&P dropped 20% in 2022, Marcus would have panic sold. He knows this about himself. But he did not panic sell, because Priya was sitting across from him looking at the same dashboard, and she said, "We're not touching it." We agreed. The shared vision converted an abstract idea into a social contract. And social contracts are enforced by something much more powerful than discipline. They are enforced by the desire not to let someone you love down. Behavioral economics research, specifically work building on Daniel Kahneman's framework for decision-making under uncertainty, consistently shows that loss aversion is strongest when losses feel social and shared. In other words, you are more likely to hold through market volatility when breaking your investment plan means disappointing your partner than when it only disappoints yourself. The relationship became Marcus's behavioral circuit breaker. And the wealth gap that creates over 20 years is not small. Investors who hold through market downturns versus investors who time the market by selling and re-entering. Dalbar's annual QAIB report, which tracks actual investor behavior versus market returns, shows the average equity fund investor earns roughly 3 to 4% annually less than the index itself, purely due to behavioral errors. On a $400,000 portfolio, that gap compounds into a difference of over $1 million over a 20-year period. $1 million, lost not to bad investment selection, but to panic. And aligned partnership is one of the most effective behavioral anchors in existence. Here is where we land. The finance world told Marcus that love was a distraction from wealth, that emotional investment would compromise financial investment, that the rational play was to go it alone, optimize for maximum flexibility, and treat relationships as something to consider after financial independence. That framework cost a lot of people a lot of money, because it missed the most important variable. Wealth is not just about capital accumulation. It is about behavioral sustainability. It is about whether you can stay the course for 20 years when the market is terrifying and inflation is eating your paycheck and your friends are panic selling and every headline says the system is broken. Almost nobody can do that alone. The psychology of long-term investing demands something human to hold on to, a shared mission, a person, a reason that is larger than a number on a screen. Priya was not Marcus's financial advisor. She was his anchor. And the difference between an investor with an anchor and one without is not 3 or 4% annually. Over a lifetime, it is the difference between retiring at 62 and working until 73. At the start of this video, you probably thought the question was whether love helps or hurts your finances. That was the wrong question. The right question is this: does your relationship raise your behavioral floor, expand your risk capacity, and lower your cost structure? Because if it does, you are not just in love. You are in the most leveraged position a retail investor can be in. And if it does not, if your relationship drains your money, disrupts your psychology, and pulls you away from your financial goals, then the math works in reverse, and that is a different conversation you need to have at your own kitchen table. Marcus knows which one he has, and 3 years in, with $400,000 in combined net worth and 2 fully funded Roth IRAs and a shared spreadsheet that has never once caused a breakup, he would tell you that falling in love was not a detour on the road to wealth. It was the road. If this reframed how you think about the intersection of relationships and money, subscribe and hit the notification bell. The next video covers the specific joint net worth tracking system Marcus and Priya actually use, including how they maintain financial independence inside a shared household without resentment, without secrecy, and without ever fighting about money again.